London, 2016. A confident founder who calls himself the Chief Wizard launches a company promising to build software as easily as ordering a pizza. 9 years, $450 million, and one very elaborate chatbot later, it turns out the wizard had about 700 people behind the curtain, and even that wasn't the real secret. Let's dissect this. The company started life as Engineer.ai, founded by Sakin Devdugal, a serial entrepreneur who, by his own retelling, built currency arbitrage software for a bank as a teenager and ran a cloud computing startup in his 20s. Dougal wasn't new to fundraising, and, as it turns out, he wasn't entirely new to fraud allegations either. He and an early collaborator, Saurabh Dut, had previously faced scrutiny tied to a venture connected to the Videocon group, years before either of them touched Builder.ai. Dut would later show up on Builder.ai's board for a few years before quietly stepping away, filing that one under pattern, not one-off. By 2019, the company had rebranded to Builder.ai, and the pitch had crystallized into something almost insultingly simple. Describe the app you want, and an AI assistant named Natasha would handle the rest. Requirements, architecture, code, all automated, all instant, all as easy as ordering a pizza. Investors loved it. Microsoft loved it. Qatar's sovereign wealth fund loved it. Between them, plus Insight Partners and SoftBank, they poured in something like $450 million. At its peak, Builder.ai was valued at $1.5 billion. Here's the part that should have been the whole story. Natasha wasn't really doing the work. In 2019, not last year, not during the collapse, 6 full years before any of this became public knowledge, the Wall Street Journal reported that Builder.ai's AI-powered development process leaned heavily on human engineers. And by the time everything fell apart in 2025, the actual number that came out was somewhere around 700 engineers, mostly based in India, paid between $8 and $15 an hour, manually writing the code that Natasha was supposedly generating on her own. Former employees had a nickname for the whole operation: a call center with better marketing. Natasha apparently was something of a running joke in the office. The AI everyone internally knew wasn't really an AI being sold externally as the future of software. Wait, so the WSJ published this in 2019 and the company just kept going? For 6 more years? And nobody who invested afterward noticed? Microsoft put money in during 2024, 5 years after the reporting. That seems like a research failure. That seems like a lot of things. And if you're thinking, surely somewhere in those 6 years, the industry got a little more skeptical of Dougal specifically. In 2023, the Chief Wizard was named EY Entrepreneur of the Year for the UK. A real award from a real accounting firm, 4 years after a real newspaper reported the AI wasn't real. Sometimes the story isn't that nobody was watching. It's that everybody was watching and applauding anyway. Now, if this were the whole story, it'd already be a pretty solid episode. Promising AI, delivering humans, getting an award for it. Wizard of Oz, essentially, if the wizard also had a trophy case. But here's the twist. The fake AI thing, as embarrassing as it was, isn't actually what killed Builder.ai. What killed Builder.ai was math. In May of 2025, a lender called Viola Credit seized $37 million directly out of the company's accounts. The reason? An audit had found that Builder.ai's reported 2024 revenue, $220 million, bore only a passing resemblance to its actual revenue, which was closer to $50 million. That's not a rounding error. That's a $170 million gap, roughly the size of pretending you make 4 times what you actually make and hoping nobody does the division. So where does $170 million of pretend revenue actually come from? Investigators pointed to a company called Verse Innovation, a separate business, not part of Builder.ai, but a close partner, and a practice called round-tripping. Here's the mechanism, stripped of jargon. Company A sends money to Company B for a deal. Company B turns around and sends a similar amount back to Company A for a different deal. No real product moved, no real customer benefited, but now both companies can point to a signed contract and say, "Look, revenue." Do that enough times, with big enough numbers, and you can inflate a company's books without a single additional dollar actually entering the business. Verse has denied the allegations. The investigation, as of this recording, is very much still ongoing, including a criminal probe by the U.S. Department of Justice into potential investor fraud. By February of 2025, the board had seen enough of the gap between reported numbers and reality to remove Dougal as CEO, replacing him with Manpreet Ratia, a former Flipkart and Amazon executive. Ratia's first real task on the job was less steer the company forward and more open the books and immediately regret it. Within months, roughly 40% of the engineering staff had left. By May, the company filed for bankruptcy, reporting somewhere between $50 and $100 million in debts against $5 to $10 million in assets. For a company once valued at $1.5 billion, that's not a rough quarter. That's a building with the load-bearing walls removed. Which brings us to the single best detail in this entire story, and I promise I'm not making it up. When the Financial Times started asking uncomfortable questions about Builder.ai's accounting back in 2024, a full year before the collapse, the company's response wasn't to open the books and clear things up. Its response was to hire a corporate private investigation firm, a crisis communications specialist, and a team of defamation lawyers. Not auditors, not a forensic accountant. Investigators, a crisis PR team, and lawyers whose entire specialty is suing people for saying true things about you. The Financial Times published anyway. Turns out, hiring defamation lawyers doesn't retroactively fix a spreadsheet. So here's the running scoreboard. The AI wasn't really AI, confirmed in 2019, 6 years before anyone acted on it. The revenue wasn't really the revenue, confirmed in 2025 by a lender who noticed before the auditors apparently did. And the company's answer to getting caught both times was some version of manage the narrative rather than fix the underlying problem. Two different deceptions, same instinct, one award in between. To be fair to the actual engineers in this story, the 700 people writing real code behind a fictional chatbot, they weren't running the con. They were doing legitimate work for legitimately low wages while somebody else's marketing department cashed the credibility. Some former engineers, by the way, built genuinely solid AI systems within the company, on par with some real code generation tools on the market today. The fraud here sits with the executives and the accounting, not the people who showed up and did the job they were paid for. Here's the bigger pattern, and it's bigger than one wizard and one chatbot. AI washing, describing perfectly ordinary human labor or basic automation as artificial intelligence because the label alone moves valuations, isn't unique to Builder.ai. It's a symptom of an industry currently willing to fund almost anything with the letters A and I attached to it, with due diligence that apparently sometimes amounts to reading the pitch deck twice and award ceremonies that don't check back in 4 years later. So, was Natasha ever really an AI? Not in the way it was sold, no. Was Builder.ai's downfall actually about the fake AI? Also no. That scandal broke in 2019, and the company survived it for 6 more years, an award ceremony, and another year of fundraising. What actually ended it was $220 million of revenue that turned out to be $50 million of revenue, discovered by a lender doing the one thing nobody else apparently had, checking the math. The wizard had a curtain, and behind the curtain were 700 real people doing real work. But the thing that finally pulled the whole curtain down wasn't anyone looking behind it. It was someone looking at the invoice. If you liked this one, there's more where that came from. Subscribe, hit the bell, and if you want to help me keep digging through bankruptcy filings so you don't have to, consider supporting the channel. Links below. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.